Welcome back to another episode of the Evergreen Marketing Era for Women Entrepreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Andria Singletary, podcast strategist for women in business who want to build a podcast strategy that drives leads and sales. Okay, summer is right around the corner, and I'm especially feeling it because I am 3 months away from the arrival of my third and final baby. I'm having a July baby, and that's like in 3 months, which is crazy to say. Now, you may not be pregnant like I am, but you're probably thinking about whether or not you should take a break from your podcast this summer. If you're a mom, summer may mean for you that the kids are home from school, which can make recording difficult, especially if they, are running around and different things like that. Like trying to find that quiet time to record may not be realistic for you this summer. Or you could have some vacations planned or plans to spend all your free time at the beach. Whatever the case may be, you are probably thinking about taking a break this summer, or maybe you're feeling hesitant to take one. The thought of taking a break, you're wondering if, is that going to result in me having to start over and rebuild my podcast audience? Like, how is that going to impact my podcast? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about specifically, one, whether or not taking a break actually impacts your podcast, but also two, how you can realistically go about taking a break. Let's jump right into it. First, let me say is that you can take a podcast break without having to regain momentum when you return to your regular posting schedule. You're not going to have to start over from scratch, essentially. But before I share a little bit more about that, let's dive into the first way that you can go about setting up your podcast break. Now, this one is going to make my, people who are recovering perfectionists, this is going to make you uncomfortable. But you literally can take a full break. I'm talking like full stop, take a break, no posting any new episodes during the summer. Now, if that made you cringe or made you super anxious, I want to talk to you. It's hard, if you have been very consistent with your podcast and, taking any kind of break is hard. Like I felt that last year when I decided to take a few breaks, just when like life was very chaotic and stuff like that. But this is your permission to take a break. If it is not realistic for you to maintain your regular publishing schedule, don't put that stress on yourself to try to make it happen. You can take a break. Your podcast is not going to fall apart. You're not going to lose your audience. You're not going to, lose everything you worked so hard to build. You can take a break. And like I said, last year, I took quite a few breaks. I took off in April. I took off again, I believe it was in August. And then most of Q4, I did not publish any new episodes. And my podcast didn't fall apart. Actually, those months that I didn't publish new episodes, I still had new downloads each month. Now, I'll be honest, fully transparent. My downloads weren't as high as they normally are when I am publishing new content. And it makes sense, right? Because the people who actively listen to my podcast, if they've already listened to the episodes, they're not going to listen again unless they need to go back and re-listen, take notes, something like that. But what it tells me is that there were still new people finding my podcast, even though I wasn't publishing new content. And so that's just one example. I have a client who actually, she takes off in the summer and during the holidays from publishing new episodes with her podcast. And the same thing with her. She comes back, and doesn't skip a beat. Like her listeners are back ready to listen when she starts publishing new episodes. She's not having to rebuild that audience. And so it's okay to take a break. But when it comes to podcast content, you really have to shift how you look at it. Podcast content has a longer shelf life and a higher return compared to social media content. So as we know, when we take a break from posting on social media, when we come back, we do have to re-engage our audience. We do have to, get that engagement back up, get those views, all of that back up, and essentially rebuild trust with the algorithm. Podcast doesn't work like that. As long as you are optimizing your episodes for search aka prioritizing SEO, you can have your podcast have people find your podcast weeks, months, even years after you've hit publish on your episodes. And so, like the example I gave with me, I still was getting new downloads in the months I wasn't publishing new content because new people were finding my podcast. And that's because I do prioritize SEO. I do keyword research for every single episode. You don't have to regain trust with the podcast algorithm. It doesn't even work like that. You're not going to be penalized for taking a break from publishing new episodes. And so it's a different vibe when it comes to podcasting. The reality is that when you have a podcast, you don't have to publish content at a high frequency to get leads, nurture, and convert. If you want to take a break from publishing, you can do that, but you need to make sure you take some time to optimize your episodes for search, update links if you need to, and leverage a platform like Pinterest to drive more traffic to your podcast. Now, just a quick note with Pinterest, the months I wasn't publishing new episodes, I wasn't posting to Pinterest. However, when I am publishing new episodes, I am posting to Pinterest. And so those pins were still working for me, even though I wasn't publishing new podcast content. And so Pinterest is another SEO platform. And so again, people can find your pins weeks, months, years after you have posted them. So when you are leveraging SEO, and again, doing it both for the podcast listening apps, doing it for Google as well as for Pinterest, those things will work for you when you're not publishing new content. This is why I stress so much about prioritizing SEO. Anytime someone comes to me and they're a business owner who either wants to start a podcast or they have a podcast, one of the first things I say is you need to prioritize SEO. It's not a maybe. It's not a suggestion. You need to do it. If you want your podcast to actually work for you, keep you visible, bring in new leads, you have to prioritize SEO, point blank, period. That is why it's a core part of my accelerator program. SEO is not something you can skip out on. So the first option you have is taking a full break. Next option you have is batching. Now, batching is not one of my favorite things. Even when it comes to my monthly episodes, I do batch sometimes, but I'm not consistent with it. Sometimes I'm recording the episode the week before it's supposed to be published, or even a few days before it's supposed to be published. But if batching is something that you can realistically commit to, it makes sense for you, you can batch your summer episodes. So I would recommend starting that now, though, because again, June will be here in a minute. And so you want to get on top of that. So this is going to require you to get ahead on planning your episodes, recording, all of that. So batching is a viable option, and it'll, ensure that you still have new content going out each month. Again, it's not mandatory to do that, but that is an option you have. Another option you have is to switch to bi-weekly episodes. Now, this is something that I don't think a lot of podcasters consider all the time, or it feels weird to go from doing weekly episodes to then doing episodes every other week. But this is something that's still effective. Again, we are looking at podcasting differently. And so it is content that has longevity, and it doesn't require us to post at a high frequency in order to see results. And so bi-weekly episodes is still very effective. I actually recently worked through this issue with a client. One of my accelerator clients, she had shared with me that the next few months are really, really hectic for her in her personal life. And so she was really hesitant to take a break from her podcast because she had consistently been putting out weekly episodes, and she didn't want to lose momentum with her podcast. And so we talked through that, and went over, how with long form content, it functions differently than short form content. You don't need to publish as much of it in order to see those results. And so when you switch to bi-weekly episodes, a key thing is that because you are creating fewer episodes, you really want to be strategic in the type of content you're creating. And so this is something we discussed, we wanted to make sure that she was still creating content that was supporting her goals, but really looking at making these topics like being really hot topics, like topics that are currently relevant to her ideal client so that it's going to attract those people that she wants to attract, nurture them, and convert them into her offers. That is one of the things too. Like, you don't want to create any old random episodes. You really want to create some core pieces of content that are really going to essentially do the heavy lifting for you, that are really going to, again, attract those aligned listeners, nurture your current audience, and convert them into your offers. And so you do want to think about how to best approach that strategically. I'm actually planning to do this during my maternity leave. I was going back and forth about whether or not to batch or just take a complete break or do biweekly episodes. And I've decided to go with doing biweekly episodes just because it's something like I enjoy doing my podcast and everything. And I really I didn't want to completely disappear for 3 months. Again, I could if I wanted to, not a big deal if I did. But I still wanted to put out new content, especially there's some things that I'm currently working on now in preparation for when I return from maternity leave. I'm making some pretty exciting changes in my business. And so I'm going to leverage the podcast while I'm on maternity leave to help support with that. And so I decided to do biweekly episodes. And so, again, this is something that you can do. This is another option. It cuts down, how much content you're creating. And if you do switch to biweekly episodes, you can also even batch them, which is what I'm planning to do. So I'm kind of doing a combination of batching and creating fewer episodes. So that is an option as well. I think this is the fourth option. Yeah. So your fourth option is to replay old episodes, but changing the titles. Now, this one I really love. One of my clients actually did this previously where she took, I think it was some of her most popular episodes and did a replay, but she optimized them using different keywords than the original episodes when she published them. And she actually saw that the replay, those got more traffic compared to when she first published the episode. And so that's something you can do, like getting your most popular episodes, or if you have some episodes that maybe are relevant, during that time of year. So for instance, a lot of times when people support moms, they're going to share different strategies on navigating the summer with kids at home and stuff like that. And so if it's a topic that would typically be trending during that time of year, you can pull those episodes, but literally pulling from your podcast archive and doing a replay. But instead of just putting replay of episodes such and such, come up with a new title, do some keyword research and use different keywords. And this is a great way to kind of refresh your content and still allow people who maybe they didn't listen to those episodes, but now they're going to listen to them, especially they have a new title and different things like that. And it's really simple on your part because all you're having to do is, one, do your keyword research, come up with a new episode title. I also recommend recording a brief intro, letting your listeners know that it is a replay of a previous episode, and just adding that little part into the original audio, scheduling, uploading it, all of that, you're good to go. So it's not like you're having to record brand new episodes, but it's still putting out content and different things like that. So that's your fourth option. The last option, and this is actually something I did, I want to say it was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 months in the summer I did this, but a podcast takeover. So you can have people record an episode and you publish that episode. So With this, there's a few things you want to make sure you do. One, whoever you're going to have do the solo episode, you want to make sure that they're truly someone who is aligned in a sense of like the topic that they're going to be speaking on is going to be relevant to your listeners. It's someone who you actually trust. You want to make sure you're always thinking about, what is in it for my listeners? Is this something that they can actually benefit from? And so that's an option to do. When I did it, I actually reached out to my clients and had them pull from their archive one of their most popular episodes. And basically, I recorded a brief intro introducing like who the person was, why I recommend the episode, and then use their original audio file. And that actually did really, really well. And it's nice too because while you are still putting out essentially new content, you're helping other people grow their podcast audience because now you're helping to drive, that traffic over to their podcast too. So that is like your fifth option. And I'm starting to see more and more people do that. I actually had one of my clients reach out to me about recording a solo episode for her podcast for the summer because she's actually doing something similar where she's doing a mix of bi-weekly in the sense of she's going to do 2 solo episodes a month. And then the other 2 episodes is going to be a podcast takeover. And so you can get creative with this. You can mix and match these. But what I'm really getting at here is I want you to know that you do have the permission to say, you know what? I don't want to record any new episodes. I don't want to set nothing up. I'm just going to take a summer break. And you can do that. I will say this though. You do want to let your audience know, like give your listeners a heads up if there's going to be a change in your regular hosting schedule. So if you're going to switch to bi-weekly, if you're going to take a full break, just let them know, whatever the last episode is that you're going to put out before you switch to your podcast break, you just want to let them know. And the reason why we do this is because it helps maintain trust with your audience. You're letting them know what to expect. And so they're not thinking like, did she quit the podcast? Like, what is going on here? And so this is what you want to do. But yeah, this is it for this episode. But I would love to hear from you. Have you ever taken a podcast break? If so, how did it go for you? If you haven't taken one, are you planning to take one this summer? I would love to hear from you. So send me a DM. You can DM me on Instagram or Threads, letting me know like what your plans are. And again, if you've ever done this before, and to just share, what has worked for you. I will make sure to link both my Instagram and Threads down below in the show notes. But that is it for this one. I'll catch you in the next episode.